Hello mortals, I am the booktube goddess, blessing and zapping books so you don't have to. There's been a lot going on with me this month. I've had some serious financial and professional setbacks, and it's been my 20-year anniversary with my spouse. So there's been a lot of ups and downs, but I want to get back on track and back on schedule with BookTube. Now I want to go back to September because there were some books that I was reading on my TBR that I haven't done an overview on yet. Now, you may have remembered that in September I started my game of Shelve It or Shove It, the completely superficial game where I pick books for my TBR based solely on their covers. And one of the books I picked was The First Girl Child, which I have a separate review on, and spoiler alert, it's gotten zapped. I do not recommend that book. But there's another one, Reticence by Gail Carriger. And I was also going to read the Thunderhead, the second book of the Skies series by Neil Shusterman. If you've been following me, you know that I did not like Skies. I zapped that book. So for Skies itself, I'm going to have to zap the book. It is not recommended, but I wanted to give the Thunderhead a chance. Also, I had finished all those books, I needed more books to read, and I asked on Twitter what should I read next because I was in the mood for a fantasy novel. And I was recommended An Ember in the Ashes by Sabaa Tahir. Now let's talk about Reticence by Gail Carriger, the other novel I picked in Shelve It or Shove It. Now, since this is the fourth book of a series and the final book of a series called The Custard Protocol, I'm not going to talk too much about it. I will say that the book gets my blessing. It is another whimsical entry into this steampunk universe. Now, I do want to point out that when I was doing Shelve It or Shove It, I thought this was Gail Carriger's middle grade series, but it is not. The middle grade series is called Etiquette and Espionage, and it's set in the same universe, but it's a different series. So apologies for that. Anyway, the Custard Protocol series follows Gail Carriger's original series, The Parasol Protectorate, and again, if you don't know Gail Carriger, please pick up The Soulless, which is the first book of the Parasol Protectorate. Okay. I will say I did enjoy the novel Reticence, which was from the viewpoint of a male character, Percival Tunstall, which is unusual for Gail Carriger because she usually writes in the female point of view. Now, while I did give this book my blessing, I have to say that this is not one of my favorite Gail Carriger novels. I thought the pacing was pretty slow for a Gail Carriger novel, and the main storyline involved traveling to Japan on a quest involving spies and foxes. However, this main plot didn't really get started until about a third of the way into the novel. And also, this happens in a lot of her novels, but it was especially apparent in this one, where it's hard to take the event seriously because the characters aren't taking life and death situations seriously. For example, they're in the middle of this big gunfight, and they're cracking jokes and no one's taking it seriously, so it's hard to take the fight seriously. But again, despite some flaws, what I thought were flaws in the plot and the pacing and sometimes the tone, I just still have to bless this book because I love her characters so damn much. Her writing is so whimsical, it's so fun, it's so refreshing. If you've never read Gail Carriger, go onto Amazon, go to Soulless, which is the novel I really suggest you read, and just read the first chapter. And if that doesn't draw you in, if that doesn't enchant you, then she's probably not for you. But she is for me. Now, if books were food, Gail Carriger's books are cotton candy. It's fluffy and sweet, and you can just inhale it. It's a tasty, delightful snack, but you don't want to have a diet purely on cotton candy because it's just a little too sticky and not enough nourishment. Now, the next book I read was The Thunderhead by Neil Shusterman, which is the sequel to Skies. And I did not like Skies. My problem with Skies and my problem with the entire series are the world is I don't buy the premise. I find it hard to imagine that a society where we've conquered death hasn't addressed the issue of overpopulation and just keeps procreating and building the population without any foresight. It just doesn't make sense to me. Now, I will say I enjoyed the Thunderhead more than Scythe because it was about the artificial intelligence that emerged from the cloud. The Thundercloud, Thunderhead, was kind of interesting, and I liked the Thunderhead's point of view, which was sort of a little snippet before each chapter. I thought that was pretty interesting. So humanity is governed by this benign artificial intelligence. The only aspect of the earth the Thunderhead doesn't oversee is the reaping of the dead, what the skies do. The skies and the Thunderhead are two separate instruments that govern the earth. The skies regulate the population by killing people, and the Thunderhead does everything else. So when you read about the Thunderhead's point of view, when it sort of ruminates about the situations of the skies, which are going through their own political revolution, the artificial intelligence deals with its own loneliness, questioning the meaning of life, questioning what God is, questioning whether it is God. It's some interesting stuff. But when you go to the main story of Citra and Rowan, Citra is a young girl that has become a Scythe, and Rowan is sort of the renegade Scythe that is reaping other Scythes, which in his opinion has crossed the line of reaping people on immoral grounds. So we have the Society of Scythes sort of splinter between two groups. One, the old guard, that wants to scythe people based on the original principles, and the other group that are basically psychopaths that just want to kill willy-nilly whoever they want, whyever they want. I mean, this is just another threshold that this story crosses over to me that makes it ridiculous. Really, the entire half of the Scythe society are psychopaths that just want to kill for no reason, that just want to kill for personal pleasure. It just becomes too much. And it's just another thing that I have a problem believing, that I have a problem accepting for this worldview. There seems like there could be other reasons that would make more sense that the Scythedom might fracture. For example, they apparently have to be celibate. That seems like more of a reason to rebel, to be immortal and celibate, as opposed to wanting to kill for kicks. Anyway, I'm going to zap Thunderhead. I just have too many issues with it. I still have issues with the storyline. I don't know if I'm going to pick up the third book. I may, just because it's being hyped so much and everyone's talking about it. And I am kind of curious about how the story is going to resolve around the artificial intelligence known as the Thunderhead. But I don't have high hopes. Now, I was reading a lot in September, and I got through these first 3 books, and I wanted another set of books to read. So I reached out on Twitter for advice on what books to read next. And Nicole from Who Picked This Book, that's the name of her YouTube channel, recommended a series from an American Pakistani author by the name of Sabaa Tahir. And the series starts with a novel called An Ember in the Ashes. Now, I never heard of these books. I've never heard of this author, but it got good reviews and the synopsis sounded interesting, so I snapped up the trilogy and just blew through all 3 of the books. And when I got to the ending of the last book, I found out that it is not a trilogy, but a quadrilogy, quartet, whatever the word is. There are 4 books in this series, and the 4th book has not been published. So that was a bummer. It's totally my fault. I didn't do enough research. I just saw the 3 books, bought them on Amazon, and started reading. But to make a long story short, this entire trilogy gets my blessing. This was a really good series. It's about a civilization dominated by the Martial Empire. Now, the Martials have overthrown another society called the Scholars, and the Scholars are subjugated, as well as some other minor civilizations. Now, the novel flip-flops between two stories, one of Leia, a scholar, and one of Elias, a martial. And the chapters themselves, if you look at the table of contents, at least in the Kindle, they go back and forth. Leia, Elias, Leia, Elias, Leia, Elias. Now, this could be a little frustrating because their stories are completely different, at least in the beginning. Eventually they intertwine, but it's at the beginning you're reading two different storylines, two different plots, completely separate. And if you happen to like one more than the other, it's a little frustrating to have to pop back to one side before you can finish the storyline that you're interested in. But again, the story does come together, or rather, the characters do come together. Yes, there's a love story. There's also this weird triangle, which sometimes I really dislike, but in terms of this novel, it makes a lot of sense. So if you don't like love triangles, just give this a chance because it does make sense in the context of the story. Now, other point of view characters do get introduced in later novels, but in the first novel, at least, in Ember in the Ashes, it's just all Leia, Elias, Leia, Elias. Now, Leia's story is she is a member of the Scholar Society that has been overthrown by the Martial Empire, and her brother may or may not be a member of the Resistance, but he is arrested and taken away by the Empire. Now, if you are a fan of Star Wars like me, you hear the name Leia, spelled differently than Princess Leia, but Leia, the Empire, the Resistance. You get some Star Wars feels, but the novel really has nothing to do with Star Wars. But Leia's storyline is her quest to free her brother. Now, the storyline of Elias is he's on the opposite side of the conflict, the other side of the tracks. He is a member of the Empire, but he wants to run away from Black Cliff Academy, where he is a military student being groomed to become a mask, which is this elite group of soldier, where they wear a mask that sort of symbiotically attaches itself to your face. But there are forces coming against Elias, some of which are supernatural, that are sort of forcing him to stay in the academy and becoming a mask. Now, speaking of the supernatural, there is also a magical element in this world involving Arabic mythologies, including Ifrits and jinns, and that type of source inspiration. Now, in the story of this world, these supernatural creatures haven't been seen in ages, but they're coming back. You're seeing more and more of them, and they become more and more important as the series progresses. So if you're looking for a fun, fast-paced, easy-to-read fantasy series, it's a young adult, I believe. I don't think you can go wrong with an Ember in the Ashes, even if you have to wait for the fourth and final book to come out. The entire trilogy gets my blessing. An Ember in the Ashes, A Torch in the Night, and A Reaper at the Gates. If you enjoy my videos, please subscribe and hit the notification bell. And until then, may all the books you read be blessed.